to the Retrograde
video game podcast, where this week we finished talking about Fallout on Prime.
Wow. My name's Andrew Bascom, and with me as always is the bad boy of podcasting, Mr. Bebop himself.
My Cold Fusion, Aaron Worth.
Cold Fusion.
Cold Fusion, the salvation of all of our problems.
Right. Oh, yeah, right. That is a big part of the show.
Yeah, good to know that it took you a while to remember what the crux of the whole episode, the whole season is.
Yeah, because then they saw power, and that was exciting.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about Fallout episodes 5 to 8, the second half of the season. If you want to hear our first half, go back a couple episodes.
Yeah, we got it on YouTube. We got it on every podcast platform available, known to man and woman.
Mm-hmm. And that's it.
And that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Those are your choices.
Those are your two choices. So not only episodes 5 to 8, but also I think generally our overall recap of the season.
Yeah, sure.
A season.
What?
No.
Keep going. Go ahead.
A season that I think has taken everyone by storm. I mean, this is I couldn't believe, even as of like the early release, like you mentioned, they released the whole season a day early or something like that. And the response that we were getting online was almost like hard to fathom. I was like, is this, I mentioned in the last episode, like another Last of Us or something like that. Like, this must be fantastic. So I know you even as of our last recording had seen the whole season.
I did, yeah.
And you were kind of tempering some of your thoughts to avoid spoilers and everything. I hadn't at that point, and I was a little bit colder on it than you were, just to catch the listener up if they haven't heard that episode as well. And then I think, after the last 4 episodes, I'm excited to see if from then on your opinion changed at all, either for the better or for the worse.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm more curious about you, because I will say, in my normal life, I hate when people do this. Go like, I talked to everyone; they loved it, and you're like, well, you live surrounded by people that probably are like-minded to you. You don't have a lot of adversaries in your real life where you're like, I disagree with you. And then I have Mikey, who has the taste and interests completely unique to his own. People are like, hey, this Oppenheimer is pretty good. He's like, I don't like it. As they take a dump truck full of awards to the front lawn of Christopher Nolan.
A lot of people didn't like Oppenheimer.
Yeah, only the most successful Christopher Nolan movie and Best Picture winner. Like, it was like not only commercially successful, it was critically successful. Yeah, and then
Marissa Tomei also won an Academy Award for Best Actor in My Cousin Vinny. For My Cousin Vinny?
Absolutely.
What about you want to
start naming bad Academy Awards? We can do that.
We can do that.
Easy.
Yeah, my point is
Green Book.
Is that there you go.
Yeah.
But Blindside.
It's
not always.
Well, Blindside didn't win. Sandra Bullock won, but yes.
Well, when Sandra Bullock wins, we all win. So
yeah, boy, do we.
Yeah. I think the Oscar thing, and yes, of course it cleaned up, whatever. But I don't think that's as telling for non-critical reception of the movie. I think a lot of people can dislike a movie even though it's been very well received.
I am totally with you. Usually there are very few movies that are commercially and critically successful. And I'm using that only purely as one example.
Right.
Because Mikey's like the cooler of my life. Where I'm like, people like this. And he goes, I don't like it. And I'm like, interesting. I will crack this nut one day. And I think Fallout was very similar, where like I'm saying, very small sample size, but everyone in my life is like, have you seen Fallout?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. And including, I said my player one who loved it, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, and I think I'm somewhere like, yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah. And then I go to Mikey, he's like, what do you think? He goes, I don't know. I'm like, there we go.
I definitely was not sold on it for the first few episodes. And it surprised me because I love Fallout as a franchise.
Yes.
Even still, I was not among the people who were offended by the fact that they were making a Fallout TV show. In fact, I was excited about it. A lot of
people that were offended by it?
A lot of Fallout fans were like, don't touch this. It's like, you don't need to do this. I kind of agree that they didn't need to do it.
Yes,
money,
we do.
Of course. Daddy Bezos.
Yeah, put a little monocle and a top hat on Jeff Bezos, and he looks like the Monopoly Man.
He would, actually.
Yeah.
He would.
Us bald folk, we have, put me in a white t-shirt. I'm Mr. Clean.
Mr. Clean.
What are you going to do?
Minus the whole part about clean. So
that's true. I don't shower. It's a religious thing.
It is, and you know what?
So don't ask about it. Thank you.
Am I not allowed to ask?
No, that's the rule.
Oh shit!
Or when people say it's my opinion, and then you're like, yeah, right. So you're not allowed to say
no. You're not allowed to challenge someone's opinion. That's not what that's what Twitter's for.
This podcast wouldn't exist.
No, it definitely wouldn't, and nor would my unpredictable opinions be. I didn't realize I had such a wide swath of opinions, because you brought that up a lot recently, where you're like, I have no idea where you're going to land on one side or another.
We did this recently because it was the end of the year movies. Man, it must have been in January or something like that. And I had very compulsively, like a maniac, ranked all the movies I saw the year before, which was a lot. and I was going through some of the top ones, and I remember, I wish I could come up with examples, but I remember going through it, and I was like, this one was pretty good, and you're like, I don't like it, and I just kept going, like, I kept looking back at you, like, wonder what do you think about this? You're like, I'm like, oh wow.
But then you got to Past Lives. Past Lives is the best movie of last year.
See, I'm not saying you don't like stuff. There are stuff you like.
Oh, I love a lot of things.
I just think there is a lot of swerving that maybe you're unaware of.
Swerving.
And unintentionally. Like, you're not like, everyone likes that? Well, I don't.
No. See,
I think it comes naturally.
In fact, I think it's the opposite, because you and I talk a lot about how, if we're in the middle of watching a TV show or something, and you're like, I'll say something like, yeah, that's what everyone's saying. I was like, I have no idea. You're like, you don't look up anything about the TV shows and movies that you watch. And I don't like to look up what the critics are saying. I don't like to look up, whether it's movies or TVs or whatever. Video games is kind of unavoidable because I'm steeped so much in that culture. And cultured I am.
The one piece of video games are like, well, it's unavoidable.
It's unavoidable.
Everyone's talking about it.
It's everywhere.
I can't walk down the street.
It's true. It's true. Everyone's like, are you from the Retrograde? By the way, here's my thoughts on Stellar Blade. I'm like, all right.
Oh, okay.
You shouldn't have censored those outfits. I don't know. That's a whole thing. I don't know if you're aware of.
I'm not. What are they censoring?
There's a game, Stellar Blade, and it weirdly, I kind of dismissed it because all of the advertising about this game was basically about the fact that there were like really good ass mechanics in it.
Well, those targeted ads I've been getting for it recently now are really starting to hit home.
Now you understand.
Why is my algorithm that way? Yeah.
It's hard not to look at this game, but I was like, if that's what they're going with, it's not going to be a great game. And then there was kind of like a play testing, I think, and then by the time the actual release came, or the game released and then there was a patch or something along those lines. No, sorry, yeah, demo to release. And they had quote unquote censored some of the outfits by making them less scantily clad.
Okay.
And people are not happy. You won't believe this, Andrew. They are not happy about it. Nerds need their full butts showing, I guess. I don't know.
Culture, am I
Cancel
right?
culture, exactly.
Woke mind virus.
And it is the worst one we've had since COVID, which wasn't even real.
I know. Look, it's funny you believe that. Okay, that's interesting.
We're about to get banned from YouTube just for saying those words. Yeah. So I try to avoid the Stellar Blade thing. I couldn't avoid, but I do try to avoid critics and opinions and stuff before I watch something. So after, I just don't see the point at a certain point. Except for something like even Fallout or Oppenheimer, when I'm so on the other side of things where I'm like, what is it that I'm missing? I must be missing something about this. So we'll get into that, I think, as we get into our conversation about Fallout in general. Do you want to do, and we should say this to the listener as well, usually we bullshit a bit up top and we get into some of our games we've been playing and all that stuff. This is going to be full Fallout.
Yeah,
and
all Fallout
all the time. We'll obviously meander a little bit, but we're going to get into it right now. So if you haven't finished the full season of Fallout Season 1 on Prime, you should do that now, I think, is reasonable to say before listening to our opinions on it. And also, if you want the full picture, go back and listen to our first episode where we reviewed the first 4 episodes of the season. But before we get into like our thoughts and opinions on the season writ large, do you want to get into our kind of episode by episode breakdown?
Sure, let's do it.
So we left off episode 4, coming straight into episode 5, where Maximus, who is kind of moonlighting as Titus, the knight, he took Titus's armor. They're Maximus and Thaddeus, who is his once bully and now apparent best friend. Yeah. They had just gotten away with one, and they're like best friends now. Yes. They're kind of like laughing and joking around. And this is going to kind of lead into something that I think I'm going to touch on a lot in the episode, is the wild swings in characters' motivations and opinions and just kind of their general overall being from one spectrum to the other, or one side of the spectrum to the other. Thaddeus is like as unpredictable a character in this, played by Johnny Pemberton, who I think is the best part of this whole season.
Oh, nice.
But you never know if he's going to be best friends with Maximus, hate Maximus. I really struggled to understand his motivations with it. Did that land the same way for you, their relationship?
It all happens very fast. I get it that, like, it's weird in streaming. They always make everything like longer than it has to be. Yeah. And I get maybe by the nature of the show being probably pretty expensive that, like, it probably could, I don't know what your feeling is. It could have stretched out the storyline a little bit more, because we know that he's a bully. Yeah. So we know he doesn't like Maximus. Yeah. But then Maximus is now in the suit. He doesn't see his face until he's like, oh, I'm respecting as a squire. That's going to be great. But in the backyard, you're always worried that he's like, well, he might turn on him because of this weird religious cult or the brotherhood that they seem to be part of. Right. And so that's always in the back of your head. So when he shows him his face, which is this episode.
It is this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's right after they are best friends.
Yes.
It's and they go through the whole character arc.
But that makes sense though, then, because he doesn't actually know it's him.
It does kind of make sense. Like the fact that they're best friends, great. But they also go through the trouble of having a scene in the episode prior where Thaddeus essentially atones for his sins of bullying Maximus.
Without knowing it's Maximus.
Without knowing it's Maximus. So I thought what they were setting up was a character arc for Thaddeus, and instead he's just constantly playing like the foil to Maximus for no real predictable character reason. And he's not the only person in this show that goes through those arcs where it's like, you just have to be okay with a character choosing to be a certain way because that's the way the writers wanted them to feel. And maybe that's an unfair judgment to lobby against it, but I don't think they did a good enough job making the characters believable in their choices from moment to moment.
See, the only reason I would disagree with that is because the whole time you see Maximus resisting showing him his face because he knows he's going to turn on him. And then that's exactly what happens.
Right.
So like there is a setup and a payoff. It is a kind of a classic thing of like, you don't know it's me. Like let's say like another really good show. Let's say like Frasier.
Sure.
Right?
Of course. Tossed salad and scrambled eggs in the same package.
In this economy? Jesus Christ. That's a $20 meal. Is that like Niles will confess his love to Daphne, but she doesn't know it's Niles at the time.
Right.
Or she'll admit to something about liking Niles, not knowing that's who's on the other side.
Sure.
And the second that he reveals himself, it's like, well, that's not what I was talking about.
Yeah.
You're seeing.
I'm saying yes as though I have literally no idea what you're saying.
It's a very good show and everyone should watch it.
Okay.
It's a very good show.
I'm going to have to take your word for it. You know why?
Why?
I'm literally never going to watch it.
You're missing out.
It's
a good show. Now, not only commercially successful,
critically successful.
Dump truck of Emmys. You know, just saying. This is a very classic trope in TV. You know what I mean? Like I can admit to something not knowing it's them, and then when it's revealed it's them, I feel something different about it. Like I don't know. That's, you know,
I agree with that. It is a trope. Yeah, and I think
I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that's
for sure. I think Fallout is an incredibly tropey show, and you really have to be okay with that. The last kind of thing, and there are tons of things I want to touch on from the tropey element of Fallout as we go on. But the one thing I want to bring attention to big fans of the show, and you know, you talk about how it's not just Fallout that will have a character kind of reveal something to someone unknown and all this. The whole character arc of Thaddeus doesn't matter at all, because yes, he ultimately gets mad at Maximus, but the next scene they see each other, all good. Water under the bridge. There are all these forced conflicts that go nowhere. And I just have to wonder in these episodes that are bordering on like 60 plus minutes, did we need some of these things? Sometimes there's a comedic payoff. Sure. I could have done with more Johnny Pemberton as Thaddeus. There's no reason why Thaddeus couldn't have been with Maximus and Lucy the entire time.
Sure.
You know, he just runs away and is separated from them, and then immediately they see each other and it's all good. Yeah. And it's like, I just don't...
I think you get rid of him so that you can have Maximus and Lucy bond.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Instead of like a three-hander. And they're also clearly trying to show that Thaddeus is a bad guy when he locks the dog.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
And you're like, oh, so he's not a good guy. Got it. Thank you, TV show.
Even that, you're like, that means that he's going to be detestable for the rest of this season. And it's not, again, the next time you see him, redemptive arc. Or I call it an arc. It's a cliff.
You know what's so funny though? I feel like this is more real human stuff where like no one is truly evil or truly good.
Right.
They're all like some shade of gray where it's like, yeah, we all do shitty things from time to time. And then sometimes we also donate to charity.
But that's less real person and more just like what is going to be the punchline for this scene. Like I can understand if I look at the totality of someone's decisions in real life, why they make one versus another, but it's the willingness and ability for a character like Thaddeus to just go back on everything immediately as soon as he gets, we'll talk about it in the last season, the last episode, but shot in the neck with an arrow after emptying a clip at Maximus and Lucy. And then it's just like, oh, you guys good? We're good. Okay, we're good. Like, let's hug it out. Like all of these steps are just like, I can't seem to piece them together. And I know that we are a mosaic of our choices. We're not like one thing, but a quilt. Yeah. Even still, this quilt is one that I have trouble understanding. I
think it keeps me warm. I'm with you. I don't think I bump up against it other than my eyes glaze over because I go like, it's a TV like this. And I don't mean this like condescendingly. It's a TV show and they're doing TV tropes. And I'm like, okay.
For sure.
This TV show is doing TV stuff. And I'm like, yeah, all right.
So
nothing innovative, nothing exciting, but just like, it's also so generic that I just kind of like, it doesn't even bump with me because I'm like,
that I totally get. The argument that this is a totally fine show is totally fine with me.
Yeah. That's where ultimately I land, by the way.
Okay.
As we get closer to this, I want to be clear here. My player one, everyone I talk to, like, it's good, right? And I'm like, yeah. And then when I talk to them, I sound like a hater. Then I seem to you, and I seem like a super fanatic.
So I think that's also more of what I didn't hate this show by any stretch. Yeah. I love Fallout. I love the aesthetics. I love just give me more of this world.
Yes.
Ultimately, I always just feel like I'd rather be playing the game than watching the show. But it's the same kind of thing where when I go on the internet and like people in my circle of friends on social media and stuff are talking about this like it's a masterpiece, I have no choice but to be like, but what about? And then all of these things, the tropes, the generalities, like how generic the show can feel at times. And that's why when someone holds it up to these standards, I'm like, I think we need to do better and like hold space for a show that is like The Last of Us. Yeah. Like, that's a masterpiece. This is just TV.
Right. But okay, so this is kind of what I said last time. And I still think it's true now that we both seen to the end, is that my argument with like, not everything can be Last of Us, not everything can be HBO Sundays.
Yes.
TV shows is that like, I'm trying to think of what other shitty, like not everything can be Game of Thrones. Some things have to be The Witcher.
Some things have to be The Witcher or Baby Reindeer
or Baby
something.
Reindeer. I was trying to think of like a fantasy.
Yeah.
Medieval stuff.
Yep.
Something that's consumable where you're like, eyes are glazing over and you're like, it's television. It's eating my time up. And I was saying that like of the video game things, there is The Last of Us that came out. There was Super Mario Bros., which is like literally cotton candy.
Yeah.
And then there's something in the middle where you're like, I'm going to give you some grit. I'm going to give you some stuff, but it's ultimately going to be just a pleasant watch through. I get that. Like television is a comfort medium. Yeah. People go out to watch theater. They go out to watch movies. They do all, whatever. They go to concerts.
It can be. It doesn't have to be, but it is much more commonly.
Majority
yes. I like that you brought up The Witcher though, because I would look at The Witcher as an example of how like middling TV is done well.
Oh,
whereas
really?
I think Fallout is trying to be that. Like you said, it's not trying to be prestige TV, but I think fails at maintaining the tone that you need to have levity and seriousness all within that kind of same metric.
Yeah.
The Witcher did a really good job of that. At least season 1. That's the only season I saw.
There's 6 seasons.
That's 6 seasons?
Well, I only know that because it's ending with its 6th season. And one of those ones where you're like,
I did not know
what
that.
the hell?
That's crazy.
And Henry Cavill hasn't been part of the show for a couple of years. And whatever. I agree with you. This is the issue with streaming and stuff like that in general. It was so funny because I saw a thing that I haven't stopped thinking about where they go like Gen V, Invincible.
Oh, that's The Boys.
The Boys and Fallout, and going like, somebody's cooking right now. And then they go, that's like thanking your plate instead of thanking the chef. And I haven't stopped thinking about that. Because these are all independent people that have made these shows, and usually
that just so happen to be on Prime, but they're not. It's not like Jeffrey Bezos is the one cooking. He's
he's like editing it. He's like, no, one less frame here, then it'll cut better. You know what I mean? You're
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, let's get back to the actual episode. I'm sure there'll be time to talk about that.
So this is in this episode, we're gonna like fairly generically go through the beat by beat of the episodes just to kind of get us to some more conversation points. But this is when Lucy comes across Maximus in the wasteland. Again, we get this crisscrossing of stories across the entire desert of California that just seems to and like, I am an apologist for things that work out in TV and movies where you're like, well, there's no way that would happen. But this is the story of if that were to happen.
Yes.
But the more coincidences you have with these things, and you mentioned in the last episode that the ghoul pretty much teleports from
he does. He is where you want him to be at all times.
Yeah. There's a little bit too much of that. Whatever. Lucy and Maximus come across. You know what was going to happen.
You wouldn't believe our 2 main characters ran into each other.
They ran into each other.
And then also the antagonist is not far behind.
No. Here's a question though.
Well,
did we what?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Did we need them to intersect? Like a real question. Like, would this show also have worked if the main characters that we know just went off? Like, if this were almost like a collection of short stories that never quite, like, we're all working within the wasteland, and maybe there are some overarching themes and storylines, but that they didn't have to interact on an episode to episode basis.
I think that the way the payoff of the finale happens, I think you need Maximus to see where Lucy came from.
Sure.
And to have that experience together.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there would be nothing bonding them together.
True.
And his training might just to be blow her away. You know what I mean? I think some pull of emotion to show a character change.
Yeah.
I works a lot better than Lucy seeing the Brotherhood of Steel camp, where I think she's still going to be the way she is.
Yes.
But Maximus is already leeching away from the Brotherhood of Steel, and is already pretty bitter towards the world as it is. And I think seeing some idealistic, sides of Lucy help pull him in that direction.
Yeah, gives him some
further.
sense of humanity.
Yeah.
Just as when she saw the surface, she lost faith in humanity, he gained faith when he saw it, which is cool. And by the way, when I asked that question, I'm not saying it would be better if it didn't, but there's the Game of Thrones element where sometimes the first time these people that we've been following meet is like in the last episode, and that itself carries its own weight.
It totally does. I love those moments in Game of Thrones where you're like, they've never met before?
Yes,
and you're like,
that's really cool.
Wow. Okay, yeah.
And that's more the example that I'm giving. I'm like, just throwing it out there. Would that have worked? I'm sure in some ways it would, in some ways maybe not.
I don't think it changes Lucy's story, but I think it changes Maximus' story quite a bit.
Or the ghoul or whomever.
The ghoul.
Like if the ghoul just kind of shows up in the last episode, if you're following the ghoul as like a bad man, and then all of a sudden shows up, you're a bad man. That could have been something cool to play with. It obviously it didn't happen, but in this episode, in episode 5, we get a realization that the New California Republic exists, which is a big hint to Fallout New Vegas, which is kind of, I think, the cult favorite Fallout game.
That's what I keep hearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I went back because I was like, you know, the one thing that this show is great for is an advertisement for the Fallout games. And I went back, I'm like, I gotta replay or start playing one of them. And I was like, obviously it's between Fallout 4 and New Vegas. And I ended up going with New Vegas because that's the one I actually spent the least amount of time with when it came out. I was just like, it's a different developer. It seems more like an expansion pack to Fallout 3, but I keep hearing that it's like the way to go. So I'm going to try to spend a little bit more time with it there. And the New California Republic is a big storyline within that. Shady Sands is also the kind of the epicenter of a lot of the action in Fallout in this season. And is the Shady Sands, is that, do I have that right?
Sounds right.
It is also a major plot point in New Vegas as well. So if you're not a fan of the video games, to find out that Shady Sands has been obliterated is like, that's a really big moment in you know, from a gaming perspective. Which I don't know really plays at all. Like you not being a Fallout fan, did any of that?
Well, they set up the idea that this was a place that they were all going to travel to. Like they tell that story, and then to find out it's ruined is not a surprise, but it is like a story. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then there's also ultimately payoff with their mother and stuff like that. But like, I think the idea that the place is destroyed is not surprising, even though it is depressing. Yeah,
and it also does a lot to kind of like set the timeline for this TV show versus like relative to the video games. So that's kind of neat. Episode 5 kind of continues on in that way. I think the major point of episode 5 is to initiate the introduction between Maximus and Lucy. I struggled a lot with the Maximus Titus thing because he calls himself Titus for so long. So I, like sometimes I'm writing down Titus in my notes, and sometimes I'm writing down.
Yeah, they're also like not normal names or anything like that. It's not like Greg and Mike. You're like, well, I remember Greg and Mike. You know what I mean?
Actually, you know what's weird about that? The only reason I remember Lucy is because Chris Parnell in a couple episodes later calls her Goosey. So I'm like, what's the name?
Goosey is so funny. It's such a funny.
Like, I think it's Lucy, and he looks down at the paper. He's like, nope, it says Goosey, and he calls her Goosey the whole time.
That kills me that he's just like, well, that's funny you say that because it says Goosey, and that's the way it's gonna be. Well, there's nothing you can do about that.
Do we want to get a speaking of that storyline at the end of this episode with Maximus and Goosey traveling across the wasteland? They come across a hospital, and they're trying to go get some help because Maximus gets shot. And they end up careening down this tube and in the middle of a new vault. And that's how that episode ends.
I loved the medical supply sign.
Yes.
Because as I was watching it, I'm like, I said, that's a backdrop.
Yes.
And I went, TV, what are you going to do? And they fall, and I went, oh, fuck, that's what's supposed to be.
100%. So they walk into what they think is the medical supply closet, and they end up falling in a trap. And I thought the same thing. I'm like, wow, they really, the budget, because I'm still of the mind that like the big set pieces in this show don't look as convincing as a lot of people think. I think they look a little cheap sometimes. So I was like, this is a prime example of that. This just looks very, very cheap. And then obviously it's a play on us too.
Yes.
So
it worked.
And it works very well.
Bit hard.
So we get into episode 6. It starts with the shooting of the Vault Tech commercial. Do you remember Walton Goggins' name? Not the ghoul, but his actual actor's name?
Cooper. God damn it! It's gonna be something like that.
Something along those lines. Yeah. His pre-war or pre-explosion scenes are some of my favorite moments of the TV show. I think Walton Goggins can just carry so much of this.
He's
to
so
the point
good.
where him as the ghoul, I almost didn't like as much because he's like
covered up.
He's covered up. Yeah, 100%. And he's got to ham it up a little bit because that's his character and all that. He's really going Western with it. But it made me a little upset sometimes to have to go back and forth and leave not Bert Cooper. Bert Cooper's from Mad Men.
No, it's Cooper something. Well, I'll get it. I'm pulling it up.
We'll get it as Andrew looks it up. He's shooting the Vault Tech commercial in one of those long shots that you get where he's kind of Cooper Howard. There you go. Okay. 2 first names. Great.
Always
the opposite of Ricky Bobby. It's like that's the high class version of Ricky Bobby.
Yeah.
So you get the kind of introduction to what they were selling in Vault Tech. Was this an example of a 5-year experiment where scientists would live down in the vault? It's an introduction to a vault called Vault 4, which we find out very soon after is the vault that Goosey and Maximus had actually fallen into. And then after shooting the commercial, you get the introduction of what seems at this point to be kind of a meaningless character in Bud Askins.
I know. I really thought, I'm like, oh, this guy's just supposed to be a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
And they just won't stop showing up. I'm like, oh.
That was like, talk about something that this show does where if you think something is insignificant and they show it 2 or 3 times, heads up, they're going to show it 4 more times and it's going to be a big plot device. To the point where, and this is jumping way forward to the last episode when Goosey shows up to confront Moldaver in the observatory and there's a ghoul chained up to the dinner table. I looked at my player one and I was like, I guarantee you that's her mom. And my girlfriend laughed. Like she thought that I was joking. And that so much so to the point where Lucy ends up asking Moldaver, like, where's my mom? And Moldaver says, I think you know. And my player one makes a joke like, she's sitting at the table. And I was like, no, I'm serious about that. That's what it's gonna be. And it turns out that's what it was.
I did the same thing where like halfway through, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
I was like, even though it's kind of sweet, but yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah. So you get the intro then to after the Bud Askins introduction. We find out a little bit more about the backstory of Cooper Howard and his wife. They have this big party. It's very clear, if it wasn't already, that Cooper Howard's wife is very high up at Vault Tech.
Yes.
She's hosting a party with, it's a who's who of Vault Tech people. We get another scene with Sebastian, who is Matt Berry, who voiced the robot in the hospital, which is great. He sold his rights for like $25 or something.
Nothing. And also Matt Berry just walking onto stage in something he'd already be wearing.
Yes.
This beautiful necktie and the 70s suit, and he's smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
He's probably like, what are we shooting today? You're like,
he's my favorite. Every time he shows up in something, he's great. And this is and I wanna point him out specifically, and Fred Armisen and Chris Parnell as kind of like side characters who are being lauded quite significantly in Fallout, because every time you get these surprise guests showing up in Fallout, it's like a really big deal.
They really feature them too. And it's clear that they're like, we're going to pay a lot for somebody that you go, oh, yes. You know what I mean? A little bit. And they use all these just good comedic actors to help, round the edges of the show a little
sure.
bit,
where it becomes more about them. And if you remember in the last episode, I talked about how I think that they made the wrong call focusing on this like multiple protagonist storyline.
Yes.
I wanted almost a meaningless protagonist that goes into different circumstances and the guest actors do all the way, like The Mandalorian season 1. That's kind of the example I gave.
Oh, Din, yes.
Din?
Yes. See, this is how important The Mandalorian is to everyone. Din is the main character's name.
Oh, is it really?
Yes.
Mandalorian?
Yes, Mandalorian. The other guy's Man. That guy's Din. That's Lore over there.
His first name is Man.
Yeah.
His last name is Lorian. Middle name is Din.
I'm a really good main character. Everyone really likes me.
Yeah.
Great show.
But they're
making a movie about him.
That makes no sense. And this is also the Boba Fett scenario too, where it's like you get more Boba Fett and you're like, no, we just liked that he was silent and in a really cool suit. We don't need to explore him more.
Don't give us what we want.
Don't give us what we want.
Can you just learn that lesson? Don't give us what we want.
Turns out Disney cannot learn that lesson.
Oh my God. They're just so falling over themselves to give you what you want.
But I really thought that it would have worked better in that, like, moving from town to town, pocket of civilization to pocket of civilization, road narrative, interacting with the John John Daly, snake oil salesman, that kind of thing. And that would really let these ancillary characters do the heavy lifting like it seems like they were intended to do, without us being like, okay, they're almost distracting how good they are, because the rest of the show, like you said, very, very controlled, is they're rounding off the edges of the show. And I'm like, I think if the focus were on them a little bit more, it wouldn't be rounding out. It would be, they are the show. You know, I think that would have been a pretty big.
I love the John Daly thing, because when he sells medication, which I think is the next episode, so sorry, but like sells medication to him, is that like, oh right, it's a video game where that one guy keeps popping up at the shop, and you're like, how is this fucking guy here?
That's
like,
a great point.
And it's like he's here again. And you're like, fine, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
Who knows? It's similar, I guess, to the Ghoul himself, where it's just like, you don't question it. This is just what happens in video games.
Bad guy shows up wherever an important thing happens.
Yeah. It's the Sephiroth scenario or something like that. So the Vault 4 storyline in general, we find out that when Lucy and Maximus fell down that little trap, they ended up in the middle of a new vault, and this is a vault that they're clearly trying to build it up to be something bad. They alluded to it in Cooper Howard's commercial for the vault. That was Vault 4 that he was advertising, a vault that was run by scientists. It's clear that people are being experimented on. It's clear that there's something bad going on a certain level. They're explicitly told, don't go to level 12 by Chris Parnell, a little interaction.
Who is a Cyclops, by the way?
He is a Cyclops. Yeah. Did you like that?
I found the Cyclops thing to be like, they didn't nail it, even though I liked that they tried it. There was like a practical element to it. They tried to make it look kind of like not like real, like in the real world, but real, like they actually put it on his face.
Yes.
And I like that they did that, but ultimately, I don't know. It was really distracting.
It was so distracting.
I did like that he wears glasses with two things, and he looks right down the middle of that. That made me laugh really hard. I was like, yeah, that's. It only works because it's Chris Parnell.
If it weren't, so much of this Vault 4 storyline only works because it's Chris Parnell, because you get his kind of sidekick, who is the, I don't know, like the mother overseer or something like that.
Very scary, serious woman.
Very scary, very serious, very. It seems like malicious in some ways. They
should just made her a nun. And you would have like nailed it.
100%. A very one-note character. And this Vault thing was so, like the Vault 4 thing, where the main characters believe there's something sinister going on, and it turns out it wasn't sinister at all.
I know.
Was such an obvious fake out because of how hard they were leaning into these guys are evil, that the payoff was like, okay, I knew that they weren't. Like, it's just so obvious that, you know, and that, again, tropiness of this storyline is one of those elements that are compounding the generic feeling of Fallout, I think, a little bit. Did that have the same sort of payoff to you?
You know, not really. I really liked this. I actually liked this Vault 4 thing.
Because you mentioned in the last time we were talking, you're like, there's a Vault thing that is kind of your favorite part of the...
Yeah, I really liked it because it was such a change of pace. I think if we just kept doing this thing where like we're walking down the more sand and stuff like that, you need to see the other vaults to kind of counterbalance why Lucy feels the way she does. And I love Maximus seeing that this is an option, because the fact that like even he will pull himself out of there to help Lucy when really there should be no reason. He gets down there's free food and you get to sleep in a bed and there's air conditioning. You'd be like, fuck that. I'm never leaving this 100%. Place. This is incredible. And it only shows that he cares for her and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I thought it was great because it was such a change of pace, and you needed to go to somewhere new that was kind of ominous and scary. And then everyone starts taking off their tops. And my player one and I had such a long conversation about how you have to cast topless actors.
Oh my God, I think about that all the time.
Because you have to make them take off their top to go like, I'm so sorry, this part, it's a required part of the show. And this is also what feels like makes Hollywood like Harvey Weinstein, you know what I mean? Where you're just like, well, it's a back casting couch, a joke we all know. And it's like, well, take off your top. You can't be like, and like telling somebody like, hey, we would have given you the part, but you have a rocking pair. And that would be incredibly distracting in the show. You got to look normal. And it's like, oh, so sorry. It's like, and just going home, it's like, no, I didn't get the part. My tits are too good.
They're too good.
It's just blew my mind. We were laughing so hard at the idea of like, God damn, these beautiful tits.
I always think about the, like what is the call out that a casting director puts? Like, need very middle of the line, like
normal looking.
You gotta be like sitting in that that audition, just looking around like, oh, this is how they see me, isn't it?
Yes,
this is how they see me.
Because I always laugh at that idea that like every dumpy actor, they all show up at the same, and they go, oh, I know all the guys that go to these things, or like, you know, whatever. All the tall actors have to show up together, you know, whatever. I would love the idea that's like, oh, we're the normal breasted actors. That's who we are. Here we go. Hey, Nancy, good to see you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll see.
How are the tits?
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see this time.
Yeah. That and I will say I liked the set piece as well, the vault set piece. I think that worked as well. I also agree that the change of pace, them being kind of stuck down here for a little bit.
The lighting, the colors,
yes.
It all changes, and it's like it almost helped your eyes a little bit. And as someone that doesn't know Fallout, and most of the people that will watch the show will not know Fallout because of the huge numbers that are watching it. You have seen Lucy's vault.
Yeah.
And something very unique and odd happened there. And then they're showing you other vaults and something unique and very odd happened there. You need to see another vault to almost counterbalance that to go like, well, no, what's happening in the, because if we're going to 33, there has to be a bunch of them. So what's happening in these ones? Like, well, there's something very odd and unique is happening in this one.
Maybe my favorite element of Fallout is the crazy storylines that you get in each vault. So a big part of the game when you're traveling the wasteland, when you find a vault, it's like a big deal. You always go down there. You're going to get some good loot. You're going to get a great storyline. Maybe people are alive. Maybe they aren't. And you find out in the game, as you do in the show, that there are always these weird experiments that happen. So when Chris Parnell asks Lucy, so what was your vault's experiment? What was Vault 33's experiment? And she's like, no, it wasn't. It was just a society. And he kind of looks at her like, oh, you're still not aware of what it. Oh. That's really cool too. Like those are the kinds of backstories, I don't want to be totally critical of the show because there were elements of it that I did really like. And this, apart from the big confusion that the show kind of gives you about, are these people good or are they bad? And it's so clear that they're making them evil that they're definitely going to be good. Apart from that, I did really like this. I liked the characters that we got introduced to, the change of pace, the change of lighting, scenery, all that stuff in a new vault. That worked for me. I liked that. Yeah.
Some new characters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And we get also an intro to Moldaver, who is the terrorist, quote unquote terrorist who kidnapped Lucy's dad pre-bomb. You find out that she was leading some sort of cult or counter resistance. Definitely not a cult. It was, to her own words, I think they would call her commies, and she said that's the word that people use to describe unafraid people or something. Yeah, the line she says. I'm like, okay, I could have been punched up a little bit, but a weird bit of information because she is not a ghoul.
No,
and yet she has survived 200 years or something like that.
She looks exact same.
Looks exact same. So I don't know in the Fallout universe how that is possible. I don't know that they've set that up. Again, I love Fallout. People love Fallout a lot more than I do. So maybe there is an answer in the lore of the wasteland as to how this could be the case. I have no idea. Did they explain? Did I miss something?
They probably didn't. I missed it. I honestly, there has to, I'm starting to feel like there was, and now I forget it. Yeah. But there was some reason, but also a nice, like in a show that hasn't done a ton of like cliff, endings where you're like, oh my God, what is happening? And when she shows up, you're like, okay, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And I actually was like, okay, now we got to watch the next episode. Let's do it kind of thing. I actually didn't mind that because it was like I liked when they tied it back to the real world. And that's kind of why I like these last couple episodes, I think a lot more than the previous episodes. Yeah. Is because they were tying it back to this meeting point right in the middle where you're going to get a bunch of payoffs. And one way or another, you kind of do, whether you like them or not. But you do get these payoffs. And I liked because like you're saying, Walton Goggins is a great actor. So we get to see him out of makeup. Yeah. And it's really good. And seeing her past was like a moment, And the setup of Vault Tech as a sketchy company from the get-go. Yes. And it's like, oh, the company that basically saved humanity, quote unquote, is behind like some potentially malicious things. It's a good setup to get as well. We go to episode 7, where Lucy has been, in episode 6, she discovers what she feels is the secret of the vault, where there's experiments being run on humans, and she beats up a bunch of security guards as a result. And then we start with episode 7, where she's kind of on trial for that. And you find out that the people who were running the experiments on these humans were like the original scientist vault dwellers, and everyone who's there now is just kind of looking after the human experiments to make sure they're comfortable. So Lucy beat up, and as she said, threw acid on an innocent person's face to protect herself. It's kind of funny. Yeah, there was a couple of funny things, and then the end of the trial is they get ejected from the vault, but they get supplies and stuff like that. That's very funny. Made me laugh so hard. We're like, well, of course we will give you these supplies, and I'm so sorry. There's only 2 water bottles. So like things like that. I'm like,
that's again a very Chris Parnell thing where he is one of the only guys who could pull this off.
Yes.
Where he pulls out this big ceremonial sword and is like, you have to be punished, and you think she's gonna die, and then he says, we're gonna banish you to the surface, and she's like, that's what I fucking wanted the whole time, and he kind of saws at the thing and he's like, and of course we're gonna give you the 2-week supply of goods.
And then Maximus comes in his suit and
see that. Unkapachka, that Larry David situation where they found out all is good in the world, and then Maximus destroys things with his power armor on and tries to save the day because and Lucy is there like, don't do it, it's all good, and he's just tossing people. I'm like, the joke was funny and underplayed. That would have worked on its own.
See, it's funny. I take a guess here that the joke was always going to be that Maximus is going to come and fuck things up. Yeah. And then they get closer to it and they're like, well, we should put another joke in there.
Yeah.
They get a gift basket before they go. Or the joke is a big sword that cuts the thing. Like clearly, you know, when you're framing out the show, that costs so much money and you need slow-mo and you need all these like, you know, stunt coordinators and stuff like that. That's always going to be there. Yeah. And then I think they just like, it's like hat.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And you're like, you know, because you also got to put him in the suit somehow. And he's been staring at that, the core thing,
the fusion core
for a while. So
that was like from a story perspective kind of necessary because he had to relinquish the suit to help other people. And it's like, do you believe that the Brotherhood of Steel are good people, and are they there to help people? Because you're going to kill these people if you take their fusion core. That was a good element of it as well. The joke of it, the Curb Your Enthusiasm, like weird timing misunderstanding thing was kind of dumb, but ultimately a success, I think, that episode and the way that it showed.
By the way, you watched Curb this season, right?
I did, yeah.
What'd you think?
I liked it because I haven't seen an episode of Curb in 10 years.
Okay.
And this is a spoiler for Curb, so
is there spoilers for Curb?
There is, in the element of as soon as I picked up on the fact that they were going to end the show the exact same way they ended Seinfeld.
Oh yeah, right.
I was like, that's really funny. That's
really funny.
Very, very funny. And it works out great. And they're like, we should have ended the show like this. Is a big fuck you to everyone's like, what if you ended it this way? That was really good. Yeah. So episode 7, after they escape and they're banished to the surface, we get this scene where the ghoul pulls a Christoph Waltz from Inglourious Bastards and is threatening an entire innocent family in order to try to pursue Moldaver because clearly they now have this connection where they met at this meeting of the minds pre-war. What did you think about the setup of the family and this conversation?
I liked, as a person that doesn't know a lot about Fallout, I liked it because I started seeing some costumes and stuff that I was like, oh, wait a second. I know this. And they're going through the sand and you're kind of thinking like, what does a normal person do in the world like this? They can't all be monsters.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, okay, cool. I really liked it because it felt as real stakes, not realistic, as real stakes as possible, that this kind of shit would happen.
Yes.
Someone would show up and try and steal from you and you're like, hey man, we're just worried to, what? By the way, Eric Estrada as the father, fucking
was that Eric Estrada?
Amazing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was like, whoa, what the hell?
Yeah.
And he's just, please don't kill me and stuff like that. And the son, of course, hot-headed, can't contain himself. I liked it the whole part because it also showed the ghoul's true nature or his true ability that he's like, I don't care.
I don't care.
And his indifference is the reason why it's evil.
Yes.
You know, not that he was like, and you know what, bang, 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 you're all dead.
Because they kind of give him a beat at the end of shooting the son where he looks stricken a little bit. Yeah. And it's like, okay, that's a better character choice to me where he's like, I have to be the ghoul. He's an actor. He's used to playing a cowboy. Absolutely. And that's still what he does post explosion is really neat to me.
Yes. And I think there's a payoff later about like, who is he and what is his purpose and why does he care?
Yes.
That's showing that like of killing a child isn't something he is excited by.
No, not at all. I mean? He's not evil to be evil.
Right. Yes.
Which is always, I mean, that was like an early, when video games started to give you the choice to do good and bad things, it was always like, you do this thing for this old lady and she offers you 500 credits and you can either take the 500 credits, say no to them, or kill her and take everything else. So it's such like binary choices that you can do. I do like something that plays a little bit in the middle where it's like you have to make these decisions not necessarily because you want to, which seemed to be the way they were setting up the ghoul in the beginning.
Yes.
They're fleshing him out a little bit more. Came in episode 7 of 8, but you know,
like classic thing of like, I come in, I am evil, and they're like, but am I?
Yeah.
It's a Jamie Lannister problem. You know what I mean?
Yes,
like
exactly.
It's 100%. Like he's the most evil guy in the world in episode 1.
Yes. Or I, you know, my player 1 just watched Succession for the first time and going back and watching season 1, Tom, was like, he was the worst human being in the world. And by the end, he's kind of everyone's favorite person in the show, apart from maybe Greg. But yeah, the like you said, the family, like, what do they do day to day? They're lead farmers. Yeah. That's like awesome. Love that stuff.
Love it so much.
That's what I really expected out of Fallout when they announced it. A little bit more toned down, and maybe I'm asking too much because Fallout is kind of like a dial it up to 11 video game in a lot of ways, and the show followed suit. But these little pockets of information that you get where it's like, oh, we're lead farmers, that we're finding bullets.
I feel like I'm defending it again, but like it's this weird thing of like, I could tell you Last of Us in a couple of sentences and you'd be like, oh, I think I get it. You're like, it is our world, but there's a virus and has led us to a post-apocalyptic society where it's crumbling in almost every way. You're like, okay. You're like, yeah, but I'm still wearing this hoodie. I still have a backpack. I'm still, you know, whatever. Fallout takes paragraphs for you to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, it's the 50s, but it's not the 50s. Yes. It's the future.
It depends on how much weight the word retrofuturism holds to
guess
someone.
So.
That's it, because that is what it is, but
there
it's
are vaults and there's nuclear bombs, but there's people still alive upstairs, but they're not normal. Like, you'd have
graphical
to, like,
user interfaces don't exist.
Yeah, there's this thing you wear on your wrist. Okay, wait. You have to get a couple of steps there to do it. So showing this house, I just love the set design. I love the costumes. I love their jobs. Like, all of it is this weird, like, insight that you get in video games where you just kind of look over and you see people doing stuff and you're like, they're just doing stuff because they're doing stuff.
Yes.
And this is a moment of that.
That's great. I love that. That was one of my favorite parts of the whole season, in spite of the fact, and here's the recurring theme, it feels like they just lifted it straight from Inglourious Bastards or any Western movie that you've ever seen.
Sure. Yeah. Mandalorian.
Mandalorian.
My favorite Western.
The best Western of all time. The best Western since my favorite hotel chain.
My favorite best Western since that omelet I had the other day.
Oh, best Western since
the conference in the NBA
or the NHL.
Are they still East and West? Yeah, they still.
Yeah. Best Western since. I think that's it.
Is that it?
I think that's
okay.
It. I think that's all we got.
My favorite side of North America.
I mean, or the world, depending. Because sometimes they include like Great Britain in the West.
Really? Yeah. That's always a very loose term. Like,
it's
the
very
West,
loose.
I'm always like, Britain, eh?
Yeah.
So what are we?
What are we?
Very West? Like
the West?
Extreme West?
Westist is the bestest.
When does it become East again? Yeah.
At a certain point it has to, right? It's
comes back around again.
Come back around. Yeah. We go to episode 8. We'll move there because things move along pretty quick. In episode 8, I have a bunch of thoughts on. There's a lot that happens in episode 8.
A lot.
They have to tie up a lot of loose ends.
And then also lay seed for future storylines.
Yeah. They really do set up a second season. You get, as we talked about, Lucy and Maximus catching up with Thaddeus, who has the head that everyone is looking for. You find out that in order to repair his busted up foot, Thaddeus took the medication, as you talked about, from John Daly's character, the snake oil salesman, that clearly turned him into a ghoul. The funniest part of this whole season was Thaddeus with the arrow in his neck, just like, oh man, I'm a ghoul.
Why am I not dead? Oh no, I'm a ghoul. I'm a ghoul. He said it like 3 times. It's very funny.
It's really funny. It's really funny. They make up, you get Fred Armisen in the background. This was a great set piece. Lucy and Maximus have to part ways, and Maximus says, hey, I'll buy some time with the Brotherhood of Steel. You guys, or Thaddeus, you run away. Lucy, you take the head and go get your dad. When Maximus goes back to the Brotherhood of Steel and he's about to be executed because they're like, clearly you lied, you probably hurt your friend, and you brought us back the head that isn't the head that we were looking for, he kind of like turns face immediately. And that was a character choice that at first I didn't understand, but I think may work in the sense that A, he's a coward, B, he just wants approval, and C, he didn't necessarily know that wherever Lucy was going to be full of good people. So there's
that's
that
a good point.
Well.
I think it also shows why he signed up for the thing in the first place. Like, I understand that the Indiana Jones style hidden in a fridge as a child thing, like he looked at them as heroes, realizing now that they're maybe not. But I get that you're right. He just wants approval. That's what he wants. He got it from Lucy and he was like, I like you. You're good. And he gets from these guys, you're like, yeah, hey guys, whoa, wait, or whatever. So did we ever get an answer on his friend who was originally supposed to be the first squire cutting themselves in the boot? Who did it?
She did. They did.
They did?
To themselves.
Okay, that was confirmed?
Yes, because they said he was about to be executed. Yeah. And because the leader of the Brotherhood was like, people around you seem to fall into misfortune, including your friend who's going to be the squire. And that was the person who was at his right side.
Yes, I know. So I got that part.
And they said, no, I did it to myself. And then even still, I was like, I don't know that I believe them. But then afterwards, they confirm it when they're talking to Maximus, which I thought was a bad choice.
Just keep it mysterious.
I like the mysterious nature of it. Would have been nice. Of all of the characters' motivations in this scene, what I don't understand the most is the leader of the Brotherhood of Steel, who goes from almost executing Maximus to being like, you're going to be my right hand.
Yeah.
Excuse me? What? Isn't there a hierarchy? Like, that was wild to me. I did not
It's so funny where
that.
it's like the rest of the show is a Western and this is like a medieval storyline where it's always like, you're like, Robin Hood, I'm going to kill you. You know what? I like the cut of your jib. You're the sheriff. You're like, whoa, what did I do? I'm the sheriff now? You're like, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Pretty good. Yeah, no, it's 100%. Sorry, the actor who plays the head of the Brotherhood of Steel is from Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Oh, is he really?
He's an FBI agent that has, honest to God, 5 lines. But he has looked the exact same in 40 years. And so when I saw him, I'm like, no fucking way.
He's still alive?
Yeah, it's like, honestly, and still looks the exact same. And I was like, I couldn't get over that fact. Yeah, it's the Brotherhood of Steel, I think, I would say, you know how like we're like, keep things mysterious? This is one of those ones where I just don't know enough about it, where I'm like, so what is this? Yeah. What are we doing here? You know what I mean?
All you really know... The game does something similar where you see these very imposing figures who treat themselves as righteous, the Brotherhood of Steel, and they say they're here to save humanity and all that, but really they're just collectors and archivists. They're like keepers of history. Okay. I think there's a line in the TV show where it's like, so you steal old things and use those old things to defend yourself from people stealing those old things back from you. And it's like that's what they do with the power armor. It's what they want to do with the cold fusion, which we don't know it's cold fusion at this point. And in order to get it, obviously Maximus tells them where the hideout that Lucy was going to. The motivation I've come around on, where I think he was trying to save Lucy ultimately, thinking that she was going straight into the lion's den to save her dad. But before this attack on the observatory where Moldaver is staying, you get the interaction between Lucy and Moldaver, and the confrontation where you see her dad, you see Moldaver, you see who you don't realize but probably can put together that it's her mom, and Moldaver has the ability to explain all of the history of Lucy and her parents. This is what I will call the moment of exposition dumps. For the rest of this episode, it is all exposition dumps in one firefight. Is that how you wanted to see this episode going? Do you think they executed all that? Because this is the coming together of like 6 storylines, and you want it to work well. Did it work for you?
This is the best version of stupid television, where stupid television makes the audience feel smart, right?
Yeah.
And so they're giving you right up until the moment that they reveal something important. You out loud at home go, oh, it's blank. And then it happens and you go, very good. I knew that.
I got that. I am smart. I am such a victim of that. I love getting that. Yeah.
But that's what works with most people. Yes. That's why they loved it. That's why people love crime shows and stuff like that. Because like, I know, and the main characters don't. Stupid main characters. I totally understand that. It's so like, like fucking Law and Order, a main character, a very big actor, shows up in the first 5 seconds and goes like, well, that's weird. What happened? He goes, okay. And just walks away with his hands in his pockets. And people go like, I'm never going to think about that guy ever again. And at home, you're like, he did it. He did it because he's famous.
Don't you know that's Chris Kirkpatrick? Or
that's the 5th most popular NSYNC band member. But that's what people like. And so right before the reveal of Kyle MacLachlan being the assistant that talks to Cooper Howard, and he's blurry for a second, you're like, it's going to be Kyle MacLachlan. Yes, and I said that out loud and I'm like, and yes, nailed it.
A reveal that I don't think was necessary ultimately. Again, I don't know what that has to do with the whole story. It is specifically the assistant being Kyle MacLachlan's character. We understand that he was part of Bud Askin's like management system, which they've been feeding us for the past little bit.
And are pure evil. That's the other important reveal.
The melodrama of this entire last 50 minutes of Fallout is like, there is great and there is supremely evil, like to the point where I struggle to understand everyone's motivation, because it's evil on a scale of like, I won't be alive to see our success, but the company will succeed, and therefore we're going to let 200 years pass by where I will be dead, but Vault Tech will succeed. And it's like,
not for 1 second I believe that.
No,
I was like, that's not the way things work.
No.
I don't know. You know what? The exposition dump I'm totally fine with, because like you needed some reveal of how do we connect these two worlds.
Sure.
And then you go, oh, that makes sense. I did really love when they had the big room with the map behind them, and it's Doctor Strangelove 1-to-1. I was watching it, and it's all about nuclear bombs and stuff like that. And people just
I didn't
being
even put that together.
evil and stupid.
Yeah.
I was like, very good. Yes. They're like almost just like
the round table.
The round table with the lights over top with the circle and the map behind them. That's Doctor Strangelove set.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, very good. They're not even trying to hide it. You know?
Not at all. And it was good. And this was the reveal, obviously, that Howard Cooper's wife was supreme evil among all the evil ones.
She was like, I've got a more evil idea. And people were like, that's very good and evil.
Start the war. Let's drop the bombs. Bert Cooper's management program, where the weird lines that they expected to have a really big impact, like the future or the biggest weapon we have is time. And then it's like, it was like the third time they've said that. And they're like, the future, the key to the future is management. And it's like to the point where Howard Cooper's there listening in an earbud, like saying it along with him, like, wow, how did I not see this coming? You didn't fucking see it coming because he was a fucking nobody. Like, what are you talking about?
Your wife's very good at her job. Yeah, that's why you didn't see it coming, stupid. Yeah, that whole thing and his just like staggered by evil. You know what? Now that I say it out loud, I'm like, that's not that bad, because he becomes evil himself, and he's like cannot fathom people being this evil, and then he just shoots people in the head for a living.
Yeah, but on the side of good,
3 years and shit like that.
Yes,
like, you know what I mean? But and so like in that way, I don't mind it. I think everyone and their mother can kind of reveal from the beginning that Kyle MacLachlan's going to be evil.
Yes,
because he's too good and he's too squeaky clean.
They're laying breadcrumbs for that. Every time someone talks to Lucy about her mom or her dad, they're like, oh, you don't know the whole story. So it's like,
and your mom is also an angel.
Yes.
Like, I can't believe how great your mother was.
Yeah.
And now you know that was Shady Sands, and the whole thing. And she tried to start again, and they were doing it, and only to drop another bomb.
Which Vault-Tec did. Which again, you know, the only way to understand the motivations of the characters at this point is to know that we're just dealing with a melodrama. That's the only way anyone's motivations make sense now.
Yeah. I would agree with you. And then the mother being there too, is just kind of like, it was like, it could have been all tell, and then there's one element of show that's like a symbol, and you're like, oh, for God's sake. That was the only one where I was genuinely freaked out. I was like, ugh.
No, it was all tell. Not just the reveal of the mom, but the backstory. Like they talk in stories. It's like show don't tell. The writers of Fallout did not listen to that whatsoever. It was all literally, it was all tell. It was Moldaver's character just explaining the reasoning for everything that's led us to this point. And at this point, we get the battle between the Brotherhood of Steel and those at the observatory. The ghoul comes in. It's a massacre on all sides, and then the ghoul destroys a bunch of people in power armor. The timelines of the next 5 minutes make zero sense to me. So this battle's going on.
Yeah.
Everyone is like in shambles. Maximus comes upstairs to where Lucy is, and gets his one-on-one time with Lucy and
Moldaver?
Not Moldaver's not there at that point.
Kyle MacLachlan?
Kyle MacLachlan.
Yeah.
Lucy, the order of events here is insane, because he's like, Lucy, are you okay? Oh, this is your dad. I'm going to let him out. And then he shoots the lock off and then goes to Lucy, and Lucy's like, you can't let him out. No,
I know.
Say that first. What are we doing?
The fact is, she was like, don't do that.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. He's probably evil.
Yeah.
Kyle MacLachlan's character gets the drop on Maximus, even though Maximus has a gun, and Kyle MacLachlan's character doesn't have a helmet on. Whatever. We'll let that go. They have their interaction after the ghoul comes back with, because he knocks out Maximus, right? So then you get the ghoul, Kyle MacLachlan, whose name I should know. We just keep saying Kyle MacLachlan.
I don't know. Yeah, I saw something on the internet where somebody said, "Do you know Lucy's father is the same guy from the original Dune?" And I went, "Oh, you have to have the oddest viewing habits to be the only two things you recognize this guy from."
True.
Like the only two things was Dune 1984 and Fallout 2024.
You skipped Twin Peaks completely.
Or just television in your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you get this scene between the ghoul and Kyle MacLachlan.
Kyle MacLachlan.
Where the ghoul lets Kyle MacLachlan go because he's going to follow him to Moldaver, and then the ghoul and Lucy have this moment where they realize they're going to go off and chase after her dad and do what's right. This all happens in the daytime. It's daytime out, right? And this is the point I'm trying to make. Lucy says goodbye to Maximus, who's still out cold.
Well, it's dusk though. because when the lights turn on, it's significant because it's still kind of dark.
Right.
Yes.
But here's the thing. So sun is out, right? It's like, it's clearly day enough that like, it's bright. They leave. The three of them leave. Kyle MacLachlan, the Ghoul, and Lucy.
Separately, but yes.
Separately, yeah. And then when Maximus wakes up, it is now nighttime.
Yes, it's night.
This is when the Brotherhood of Steel and every other main character comes back up to the room. How were they 2 hours ahead of everyone else and giving them time to do all this?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that all happened. First of all, who knows how the sun works?
Who knows how the sun works after fallout?
I don't know. This felt exactly like a play to me, where you do this shit where like you watch something on a stage and you convince yourself that it's on a stage.
Yes.
So there's concessions you got to make mentally to go, well, that's kind of weird that they would do that.
For sure.
To the point that when they were like celebrating Maximus, like, yes, Brotherhood of Steel, Maximus, and the other people are leaving. And it is literally like theater because they're saying goodbye. Like they come out the bottom of the steps and they turn and they look and they go, and then they turn back away and they walk off. And I'm like, goodbye, my friends. See you later. Thank you for a great season of television. Even the dog got it.
Yeah.
The Ghoul comes out. Okay, nod for the Ghoul. Lucy comes out. One big hands on her hips.
It was a curtain call.
It really was. And then Maximus, while it's happening, I'm like, this is theater.
This is live theater.
Yeah,
this is why we love live theater.
Nothing could replace it.
Yep. And speaking of play, as I've said several times on this podcast before, watching a show like this just makes me want to play the video game more than watching the show.
I know. I've seen more and more clips of Fallout, and every time I'm like, those are the graphics, eh?
Oh, I mean, Fallout 4 was okay, but even that was 8 years ago or something like that.
True.
So it's been a while, and it's like a RPG style like Skyrim. So it's always going to be dumbed down graphics in favor of a more robust world.
Right.
I don't know. You might like it. You might give it a
maybe,
shot.
Yeah.
So to finally kind of put a cap on
Sure.
the goings on of episode 8 after everyone leaves and you get their stage exits, as you said. The very end, you get Kyle MacLachlan, who's walking through the desert in his power armor. And I don't know if this meant anything to you.
I knew what it was.
You knew it was New Vegas?
New Vegas, yeah.
So that was the big Easter egg reveal of like, hey, this is where, but you know, if you've been following along and you knew the new California Republic, New Republic of California, you knew that this is kind of where like this was in the mix anyway, so didn't really have that like oomph to me as much.
Yeah. The two-headed bear on the New
That's
Republic
cool.
of California. I love that.
That's very cool.
So great.
So that's it for Easter eggs and all that. Why don't we get into just some overall thoughts on the season if we haven't touched on them? Maybe some questions, unanswered questions and things like that.
Yeah.
Concerns, what we liked, what we didn't like. Overall, we'll start with these questions for you, Andrew.
Okay.
Best parts of Fallout on Prime.
Oh, wow. I liked all the vault stuff. Oh, we didn't even get to the reveal with the brother that he went through the other vault and that they explained.
Oh God, yeah.
Sorry, and that's where the explanation comes from, that they're all frozen rich.
Yes.
Frozen rich people.
Yeah.
From the thing. Yeah, I liked all the vault stuff. Every time there was vault stuff, I was actually kind of really in on it.
Yeah.
Even with the mystery of what happened to the other vaults,
Sure.
which I know kind of set up kind of slow. I was like, oh, wow, that's really good. So I'm all in on that, which I know is going to be less and less going forward.
Yeah.
Which is kind of disappointing. But I liked those parts.
The vault was cool. Yeah, I thought, to kind of piggyback onto that, and I've kind of touched on it already, but my favorite parts were the side stories, were the side stories and the side actors. The kind of things that would happen off the beaten path of the main storyline that gave you a little bit more flavor into what the world was about. I think Fallout did a really good job of that. And that even goes to the granular level of like the use of technology and currency, being the caps and the kind of analog technologies, the retrofuturism, all that stuff very well implemented. And I did like from a tonal perspective.
Yeah.
And then again, I've already kind of said this, Johnny Pemberton is one of my favorite parts of the show as well. I thought he did a really good job as Thaddeus. Worst parts of Fallout on Prime.
What are the worst parts? I think, like the river monster. I think when they start getting big and broad with stuff, I'm like, yeah, okay. I get like why you're like, it's a nuclear wasteland. Like we got to start showing some like weird ass stuff. But I like the weird ass stuff where it's like the two-headed ox just walks by and you're like, two-headed ox.
For sure. Don't rub it in my face that much. Yeah.
I think that kind of sensationalist stuff didn't work for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that kind of goes to one of my worst parts of just consistency and tone in general. I thought that was a little bit like breakneck a little bit, where you're going from the real strong, like the attempts at comedy to the attempts at tearjerker. And I'm not saying that a show can't do that.
Yeah.
But if it does, it really has to keep its core tight. I think it's just kind of going loose and all over the place. And you never know where it's going to go, and it expects you to follow it along. Where I'm like, meet me on my terms a little bit. Tell more of a human story and ground it in whatever consistency you can. Like, you know, if you look at sci-fi in general, I don't care if there are zombies. I don't care if it's spacefaring. You just need to create the set of rules and the tone and live by it.
Yep.
You know, you can riff in that range, but when you set the range and the tone, that's kind of where you got to stay. And I found that
I think that's totally fair. Like, I really do. I don't think that's you know, like, there's gonna be stuff we disagree on. I don't think that's like a hard complaint to get over, you know?
Yeah. And I think whenever I bring that up, like the issue of tone in general and kind of the camp and silliness of it, I'm always, or I'm like, this is just weird and wacky.
Yeah.
People use camp as like a defense mechanism for it. It's like, no, it's just being wacky and weird and out there. And in my mind, there's wacky and weird that works. And then there's wacky and weird, like every Johnny Depp and Tim Burton movie, where I'm like, if you're just completely ungrounded.
That's just twisted, though.
That's just twisted.
Sick.
It's sick. Wait, why is that sick?
Oh, it's just sick and twisted.
It's not the Joker, Andrew.
Oh, you're right. Johnny Depp should have played the Joker.
Johnny Depp could have played the Joker.
He really could have.
I think I predicted at the beginning of this year a redemptive arc for Johnny Depp. If he shows up in the Joker.
As a Joker in the next Batman movie.
That could work.
Honestly, it could.
That could work.
I don't know. He's kind of a scumbag, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've learned that, but if he's a scumbag, what does that make Amber Heard? And I want to hear all your
perfect angel. Yeah, like I don't know nearly enough about that story.
I'm supposed to have an opinion.
We're like, I just every time it came up, like, no, I'm not doing this.
Yes.
You know, like it's fine. I think they're both wrong, right? I think that's what we ended up on.
I think they all suck. I think they all are just terrible people.
Put it as general, just everyone's bad.
Everyone sucks.
Just bad. No, I don't like it.
There's two people who don't suck. They're sitting across this room from each other.
Oh. Sorry, they had two dogs, so I just
yeah. But those aren't people.
Yeah. No, they're not. You're right. So who are the good people?
It's you and me.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
Elliot,
get fucked.
Yeah, fuck you, Elliot.
Yeah.
He's still sleeping from the last episode. I want to take you on a little thought experiment journey here.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you came a little bit more middle ground on Fallout.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to say is initially going to sound completely out of line.
I'll give you your time and space.
I need you to just treat this with a pair of fresh eyes.
Okay.
Is there a world in which 10 years from now, we look back on Fallout the same way that nowadays we look back on something like Double Dragon, where it's taking bits and pieces of like the nomenclature and symbolism of the game and just applying a very basic storyline to it in order to, like, I guess just make it seem like it's more unique, even though it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, is what Fallout is ultimately. It's a very generic story. They've painted over it with Fallout lettering, and they've made it more palatable in that way. But if this weren't Fallout...
okay, that's interesting. I was talking about this the other day, that in the 80s and early 90s, video games and comic books, they would go like, thank you, we're going to purchase that. We're going to make it into a movie, but we're only going to use 10% of the content.
Yeah.
Like, we don't, like... We'll make up villains. And you're
Sure.
like, oh no, we've got tens of years of it. No, we don't want any of that.
We don't want Kokoshuko.
Yeah, we do, you know, like, whatever. That's why, like, you get, like, there was a Hulk script when they were originally going to make it. He was going to fight Praying Mantis Man. And you're like, but we have things. They're like, oh, no. Like, well, do you want to use one of the comic book writers for the script? No.
No. Did you not hear my suggestion of Praying Mantis Man?
We're going to go lock a 60-year-old slick, you know, Hollywood scriptwriter with a pound of cocaine in a room, and he's going to pop out a script at the end of the weekend.
Because, you know, Praying Mantis Man is more intimidating than Praying Mantis Woman, the notable biological species that bites the head off of its mate after she sleeps with it. Yeah.
But it's, you know, think about the Super Mario's Brother movie. The movie, the original with Dennis Hopper. Like, it's that kind of thing of like, okay,
exactly.
We got the idea.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of squint at it.
Yep.
This is clearly now they're trying to do more. I understand that they're trying to make this big, in a big world like this, they're like, we can just make characters because it's a big world.
Sure.
That's totally fine.
Sure.
There's not one huge core character that we're like, if we don't use Mario, then what are we doing?
Instead, it's factions and scenes.
Yes,
basically.
right. And so, like, I think it's still progress in that way that they are like, we're going to honor that. Like, you know, there has been, I work with someone who I think is listening to this podcast, and he was saying that he was so obsessed with the TV show, he started playing the games again, and then watched an 8-hour YouTube video about the Easter eggs. And he's like, you wouldn't believe what they put into the show. I'm like, I probably won't. But is that, like, that part of it is clearly they're trying to give you, if you want it, it's there. And if you don't want it, like someone like me, I could still very much follow the show. So I think it's progress, but it's not, I don't think we're gonna look back at Double Dragon.
Not in the same way, because we have definitely made progress. But I do think that it shares the same DNA. I do. Where it's almost like if you know Canva, it's like the program that everyone uses to make like social media content.
That's why social media content all looks the same these days.
Exactly. Yes. And it's like they got the Fallout skin in Canva and they're just using it to make something that looks and plays and feels like every other generic TV show out there, but just with the slight facade of Fallout.
Yeah, I don't think I'm that far with you on this one, because I don't know what else is like Fallout out there. But you know, like
no, just the storyline itself. Of deception and I know when you know, like there's only been 6 stories that have ever been told or whatever, and it's Romeo and Juliet and it's Macbeth and it's Hamlet and 90% of them are all Shakespeare or whatever. But this does feel like it could have been a season's arc of Law and Order or something like that.
Yeah.
Like the predictability and the character paths and the setup conflict. It felt like. It just felt like a little unearned at times, and I think that what carried it was the fallout of it. Whereas, like, I'll put it to you this way: if this weren't Fallout, I guess I already know the answer because your player 1 liked it. If it weren't Fallout, would you like the show?
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, Fallout's not the thing that drew me to it. You know what I mean? It is for this podcast, as we're talking about, but I still think it would kind of work. You know, like, and it's a pretty slippery slope. We got to watch out with that argument of like, well, there's other stories like this, and you're like. Like if we go to Last of Us that we both loved, and we're like, older guy, younger kid, they have to go across the plains, and you're like, oh, you mean every story? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a tough one.
That I get. It's a tough argument to make, but what I would say is it's almost like everyone. Every show has to play by the same kind of set of rules. It's what relies on the same tropes that I've seen and heard before. So the guitar is using the same length of the guitar and all those same notes, like the scale, but you can make something unique out of those notes. Whereas it feels like you give someone a guitar and they start playing Stairway to Heaven, but with a little more twang, and you're like, I've seen that before. I know that.
And I think maybe the point that I was maybe better trying to compare it to is to say that, like, even though stories have been repeated over and over again for the existence of humanity, the things that you're going to compare Fallout to are more mediocre to bad things, whereas we could compare more Last of Us to mediocre to great things.
That's true.
You know what I mean? And I totally understand that. There is a certain broadness to Fallout that I think
that's a good way to put it.
You know, can fail it at times, but also will probably attract one of the biggest TV audiences of the year. And I think those two things do go hand in hand sometimes. There's a reason why great HBO programming is only watched by so many people, because so many people are like, oh God, okay, fuck off. You know what I mean? I just want to watch things blow up.
It is a little bit like high horse. Like I understand that. It's just, and I don't fault anyone for liking this show. I don't vault anyone for liking this show. Fallout and Vault together is fault.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. Wow. Okay, so can I ask a question about this, though?
Yeah.
So Vault Tech bombs Shady Sands because they're starting to, like, oh, people are starting to do well again. Does that mean there is a Vault Tech, like, office somewhere?
There must be.
That people are doing just fine?
Like, on the surface.
Yeah, on the surface.
They're just doing
They're doing
okay.
just okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Because I'm just wondering where the ghoul, the dog, and Lucy are going off to.
Right.
You know what I mean? I get it. It's to find the ghoul's family and all that kind of shit, but, like, so what's going on now? What's the second story here?
And there are things that I think, like, New Eden or Eden was an element in the Fallout games, at least Fallout 3, where a lot of the control was happening from these places, and there were father characters and all that. So the theming of it is very much Fallout. And they'll just have to reveal which version of that we're getting in the TV show as opposed to which ones we've gotten in the movies. But that does speak to the overall, like, motivations of all the characters towards the end that I really didn't understand. What was the motivation of the scientist injecting cold fusion into his neck? What was that about?
So he could give it to the people, like, and not just keep it within the company for the Brotherhood of Steel or whoever's going to use it. As a private company, he wants to give it back to the people so that we can power the world. And I think was trying to connect himself with Moldiver. Yeah. And so that ultimately did work out.
Okay, so that makes sense. That one I do
think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No. That's a good explanation. So I rescind that complaint. The Bud Askins one and Vault Tech and all their managers, that's one that I don't understand. Like, to be like, are they saying that everyone has become so jaded that they put the company ahead of themselves to the degree of like their lifetime doesn't matter and Vault Tech needs to succeed. Because we're talking about like, if your weapon is time, then no one survives that. No individual survives that.
But I assumed pretty much everyone in that room is in one of those tanks.
Yes, I would. Well, no, because those tanks were all the managers that Bud Askins made. Oh. And Bud Askin was the brain, obviously, in that little thing.
Yeah, he was the brain of the thing. Him pulling in that very tiny car was very
That was very funny.
I just like these little things of like, this guy's a goof. And he's also supremely evil.
Supremely evil. Like, and I don't even think he knows that he is. I think it's just, he thinks he's very successful at what he does. Yes. Okay. So, can we go back just quickly? Because I think this is the biggest concern that I have so far of everything we've discussed in this episode. Sure. This is serious. You said that your friend watched an 8-hour episode of Easter eggs on Fallout. And that made me think like, who the fuck does that? And then I'm like, of course, someone who's willing to listen to an hour and a half of you and me.
I was just going to say, I wouldn't make fun of them too loudly. Okay.
That makes sense. No, I of course, they're the only people who would have patience for us. And we thank that person.
Thank you for doing 2 episodes of this with us. I will say, I don't think it's going to come up, but like, what's her name? Ella Purnell, who plays Lucy, plays Goosey, is great. I think the reason the show kind of works is because it's like on her blank face of general optimism. If she doesn't have that, or
General Optimism was the leader of the Brotherhood of Steel.
I think so.
Yeah.
General Optimism, was that? It was something like that. Yeah.
Is it if Lieutenant Optimism before?
Sergeant Narcissist. Is that if it doesn't work off of her, that show really doesn't get out of the gates. And so I think she did a good job.
I think she did a good job. I really don't like doing this because everyone's got their craft, but Maximus. Not good. Am I alone in that? I just did not like him as an actor.
I also don't like criticizing acting because like it's kind of like this weird thing of like in sports or something like that. Future episode is that they're like, why'd you bunt there? It's like, well, I was told to fucking bunt there. What do you want from me? Kind of thing. Like I get directors are telling actors certain things to do, but what my criticism to Maximus and the actor, I can't even remember his name, is that I am constantly confused at what he is trying to convey to us. And if anything, all you're trying to do is make the audience feel a certain way. So they go, okay, I know what's going on in this scene. Or if you're ambiguous, you go, I don't know what's happening. And I just constantly was like, I don't know what he's trying to tell us.
It seemed like his choice was blank slate, was like, I'm just going to have a dead blank face. But sad, but that doesn't convey, like you say, intention. And that was hard for me to follow.
He just kind of has this like grimace on his face all the time. I'm like, what is this? What is that? This? Like, it's not sad if you do it in every scene.
Yes, exactly. Like, that's just you. That's your personality.
That's your face.
But I'm not that sad that we're out on the other side of Fallout. It was starting to feel a little bit like an obligation to finish it. Not that I hated that I watched it. I guess I'm happy that it exists. I like that video games are getting a little bit more appeal. I like that my family finally understands why I have an obsession with like 40s music. That's cool for me. But apart from that, I would say watch it, don't watch it. You're not missing out on much. If you really have a hankering for Fallout, just play the games.
I don't think they've gotten to this part because they haven't watched the show.
That's true. That's true.
I think you've all seen it. I will say, I'm going to take a wild guess that I think Mikey and I are on the low end of liking this show.
So. Yeah.
Just based on my small circle, online ratings and stuff like that. I think the show's got like an 8.7 on IMDb.
It has an 8.4 and everyone is, or an 8.5 and everyone is talking about how the best show in years is Shogun. That has an 8.9. And I'm like, there's no way this is that close to that.
Yeah, this is why like Rotten Tomatoes doesn't really work and all that kind of stuff. Metacritic's a very tough one and stuff like that. But still, nonetheless, it is an indication that there are people that like it. So I think we're on the lower end, and I hope we didn't pour cold water all over you guys. And I hope you liked it. And tell us, what are we missing? What's the most obvious thing that we got wrong, or we're avoiding, or in your questions we just completely missed on, or something like that? Let us know so that we can like it a little bit more, because clearly season 2 is coming.
Do it. Retrograde Podcast, the Retrograde Podcast at gmail.com, or Retrograde Pod, Retrograde Mikey, Retrograde Andy on Twitter and TikTok and all that good stuff. Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. On X. You got it. It's very important.
It is so important. You have to call it what it is. I don't want a dead name X.
Well, until then, we love every single one of you, and we can't wait to talk to you soon. My name is Andrew Baskin. With me, as always, is the bad boy of podcasting, Mr. Bebop himself.
Your favorite pit boy, Mikey Aaronworth.
You do have pit boy. This is the Retrograde Podcast.
Game over. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
So wait a second. The other part is, I get the Pip-Boy's got like a character that a design and stuff like that, and then they're like, it's Walton Goggins. I'm like, well, Walton Goggins doesn't look like that guy though. Like they're like got very different energy.
Maybe they have the same size forehead.
Yeah.